Tonight, Quebec's education minister wants to maintain secularism in schools. He wants schools not to use classrooms as prayer spaces. The Muslim community calls the decision systemic racism. And Washington's highly classified leaked documents show US spying on its allies, including Ukraine and Israel. The US says possibility that the documents are doctored. Later in the show, from the vaults, how not to be wasteful in Ramadan.
How we reduce food waste, how we reduce water waste, and also how we reduce energy use.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. Bernard Dranville, Quebec's education minister, wants to stop provincial schools from allowing students to pray. This comes after he spoke at the National Assembly this past Wednesday, saying he had learnt that at least 2 schools were allowing students a room for prayers. He said that transforming schools into prayer rooms is not compatible with the secularism of the state. Dranville said he has sent a directive to schools to ensure classrooms are not converted into prayer rooms. He said he cannot ban prayer, calling it a basic right, but he can ban prayer in classrooms. The Muslim community has slammed the decision as systemic racism. An imam is in stable condition after being stabbed during a Sunday morning prayer in a mosque in Paterson, New Jersey. Imam Syed El-Naqib was stabbed at the Omar Mosque as the morning congregation kneeled during prayers. According to the mosque's spokesperson, the suspect lunged forward with a knife, stabbing the imam multiple times. Right after attacking the imam, the suspect tried to flee the mosque, but was caught by the congregants until the police arrived. Paterson's mayor visited the imam after the incident. According to the mayor, the imam is in a stable condition and is being treated for a punctured lung. Washington is looking for the source of leaked, highly classified documents with sensitive information that seem to be daily updates by the US military's joint staff on Ukraine, China, the Middle East, and Africa. They also contain information on the US spying on its close allies, including Ukraine, South Korea, and Israel. There are some errors in the documents. For example, they downplay Russian battlefield casualties. The Pentagon said yesterday that it has referred the case to the Department of Justice. US officials say there is a possibility that the documents are doctored. Kyiv says the leaked documents bear resemblance to a Russian disinformation campaign. A Toronto man has been charged with several criminal offences for engaging in a hate-motivated attack on a Markham mosque in Ontario. The news comes after the 28-year-old suspect this past Thursday tried to run down worshippers. In a statement issued by the Islamic Society of Markham, the suspect entered the mosque around 6 in the morning. He uttered an Islamophobic rant and tore a copy of the Quran. He then exited the mosque and tried to hit the worshippers with his truck. The Islamic Society of Markham called the incident troubling. York Regional Police on April 7th arrested the man. Please stay tuned. We will join you after a short break.
Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. I'm here to ask you to support something which we are watching right now, Muslim Network Television. Just like PBS, NPR, or even your masjid, we depend on your donations. We broadcast Muslims, we put Muslims on air, we bring good news, we counter negative media with positive media. And here is an example. When the terrible earthquakes hit Turkey and Syria, Muslim Americans donated $100 million within 5 days. That was more than what US government gave in the same time. Getting our news out is what Muslim Network does. This Ramadan, stand for your community. Donate to Muslim Network. Do it now. Visit muslimnetwork.tv. Thank you so much and Assalamu alaikum.
In the Quran, God tells us that he dislikes those who waste, Yet we live in a throwaway society. So to help us understand how we can follow this Quranic verse better during Ramadan, we are joined by our regular guest, Zahira Epard from Sound Vision. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam. Nice to join you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Now, you're a regular guest with us and you have a newsletter that you're in charge of putting out every week. This week has emphasized how not to be wasteful in Ramadan. Tell us why you wanted to highlight that topic.
So we have put out a newsletter in Ramadan each week to reflect on different things that we can do better. And there is not much we can do better than pay attention to not only fasting, but how we go about fasting. And that has to do with trying to reduce waste of all kinds during Ramadan.
What are the top 3 kinds of waste that you wanted us to focus on?
I think it's really interesting to try to organize information in this area into 3 particular places. One, how we reduce food waste, how we reduce water waste, and also how we reduce energy use.
Okay, so those are very neat topics. Let's just take them one by one if we can. Let's start with food waste. I mean, we know that women spend hours in the kitchen and there are more dishes and dishes only cooked during Ramadan and it's like a feast every day. So tell us, why are Muslims doing this if we're not supposed to be wasteful?
So the why, I think, is about, excuse me, I'm fasting. The why is about, I think, not being mindful of our actions. And so a group called Ecomena, which is a nonprofit that does environmental research in the Middle East, has determined that there's about 1/5 of all of the food either purchased or prepared during Ramadan that actually goes to waste. That's ungodly, really. And making the matter even worse is that sometimes waste in the Muslim community is exponentially increased during Ramadan. So when a family or an individual wants to think about reducing food waste, there are 3 different areas under that header that you need to think about. 1, how you purchase food. 2, how you go about preparing food. And 3, how you go about serving or eating the food. When you purchase food, it's important not to go hungry to the store. When you do that, you sometimes impulse buy and you purchase things that may end up going to waste because you either don't like them or you don't finish them. Also, many of us, especially with families, purchasing food in large quantities in bulk. When we do that, sometimes we overbuy. If we don't like an item, we may not finish it. If we overbuy, it might go bad in the refrigerator. We need to think about food storage in this area too. When we think about preparing food, we need to plan for having no waste. That's easy to do if we don't overcook. But if we do overcook, and many of us like cooking for our families during Ramadan and eating during Ramadan, and there's nothing bad about that. But what we need to do is make sure that we are saving the food that is left over. Use it, and rather than throwing it away, use it again. Make that a priority in your home before you cook more food to eat what you've already prepared. And finally, it has to do with serving. When you are getting something on your plate, I know when we're really hungry, there's an idea that we load our plates up with things we love, but we might also put more on our plates than we can actually eat, and that creates waste too. So being reasonable.
It's a bit hard though to tell someone not to shop when they're fasting during Ramadan, because we have to shop during the day when we're fasting, right?
Well, we had some articles on planning too, and some of that involved making sure that we did a lot of those kinds of things that could be done in advance. So you're right, though. We have to be practical and reasonable.
So basically the idea is moderation. Just sort of like buy what you think you'll need, plan it so that you don't buy too much, cook so there's not too much. Although I know of husbands who refuse to eat leftovers. So how's a woman to do?
I don't understand that myself, because if we take it upon ourselves to understand that it's important for us personally not to waste, that this is part of our Islamic guidance, then having that kind of an attitude really doesn't match the reality of that's a luxury. Think about that we're not going to eat leftovers, that we only want food that's made fresh and from scratch. Is it more delicious? Perhaps, but some dishes actually improve with age. So, got to keep our minds open here.
Okay, so you mentioned food. Now let's talk about water.
Water.
While we make wudu and everything.
Yeah, water consumption is very important. Here we can think of three areas too: what we consume, what we use for personal hygiene, and also what we use around the home. So, in terms of drinking water, it's essential that we drink water, and we probably none of us are drinking enough water during Ramadan for sure. But here we could use water bottles, our own personal water bottles, instead of buying bottled water. Or when we are drinking bottled water, and this sometimes happens when we go to iftars, either in people's homes or at the masjid, make sure you're not leaving water in the bottle. That would be wasting the water. Use it for a plant. Use it even in the grass rather than throwing it away. And be sure to recycle those containers as well. You can also, in terms of personal hygiene, be very mindful of the water you're using during wudu. There's a wonderful activity I like to use when I was a teacher to show students really how much water you need to make wudu with. And we used to make water in wudu using a cup of water. Thinking about how to minimize the waste there, not leaving the water running while you're making wudu, or particularly while you're brushing your teeth. That's a lot of wasted water that can be recaptured or not wasted in the first place.
That's a good reminder. I've actually tried that. I didn't find it easy because it's so much easier with the water running than out of the.
But it makes you think about it. It really makes you think about it a lot more. And that would be the sunnah, for us to be sure that we're not wasting in all of these areas. We can also save water use around the home. For people that have purchased their own homes, consider a rain barrel. Capture the water that's coming to us as a mercy from Allah and use that water on your plants outside. It's a great way not to have to use tap water or other kinds of water around the home. Washing your car, make sure you're not leaving the hose running while you're washing the car. That would save a lot of water too.
So we're almost out of time, but you did mention a very important category. So let's try to do that one briefly.
Pretty quickly. That one would be a saving on energy use. And there's a lot of ways that individuals and families can focus attention here. So energy, think of electricity. Energy, think of transportation. Energy, think of things that we use collectively. For individual use, make sure that you are turning lights off when you're not using them, turning TVs, computers, other things off that draw electricity when you're not using them. Make sure that you're using energy-saving light bulbs or appliances if you're making a purchase. In many of the locales, particularly in North America, there are all kinds of tax incentives and other kinds of government subsidies for making these purchases that are energy conscious. In terms of transportation, be sure that you're carpooling or making good use while you're out of going to many different places rather than just one place at a time. Now, this takes planning. Now, in our masjid communities, we also can be mindful of energy use by thinking about installing light sensors that turn lights on and off with motion. That may be the best way of not having lights on for long periods of time when nobody is using that electricity. There are all kinds of ways, and the articles on the Sound Vision website have even more details than I've been able to cover in this short time.
Well, we have about 25 seconds left, but how are people reacting to these tips?
I think that there's a growing concern about the environment, and particularly climate change is driving that. In some areas, and in Canada particularly, there are groups of Muslims that are leading the way. Alhamdulillah. We have some articles on the Sound Vision site about a lot of those efforts, and we should all support them. But this is where parents come in and play a very big role. The way we act around our children is the way they grow up being mindful of these kinds of activities. Please, please, please be conscious of reducing and recycling and reusing when you can, and doing your best to eliminate all kinds of waste during Ramadan.
Well, thank you for these important reminders, and have a good rest of Ramadan, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. You too.